it starts with the quality of the person, because things are not going to go right.
The more I get punched in the face, the more I go through trials, I see them as opportunity, and I'm always pivoting it to a positive thing.
Well, that's because you're an entrepreneur. It's not a failure, it's a lesson,
Right.
You didn't lose, you learned.
Welcome to the Beyond Wealth podcast.
Thanks for having me.
This is incredible to have you on, because our journeys actually were somewhat similar in that we both started in the creative space, photography. You were actually someone I looked up to, and early on, when I first started doing photography, you were one of the bigger photographers in town. And then from there, we both kind of taken entrepreneur journeys, done a little bit of real estate, and you've done some business. So I was like, you reached out to me on Facebook and were like, what are you doing now? And this is cool. You're doing real estate stuff. And I was like, yeah. And we grabbed lunch, and I was like, I have to have you on the podcast, because we just have so many similar stories and, way we think. Yeah. And so Jason Wallis, thank you for taking time to hang out with me.
Thanks for having me, man. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So talk me through kind of your entrepreneur journey. You started maybe even before how you got into photography and built a business around that, and then kind of where you're at now.
Yeah. So, I graduated from college and was playing music, and I did a lot of music for churches and youth groups and that kind of thing, and was doing that, and came back. I did a summer. I graduated from college, went and did a summer doing camps. That was the big time we worked. And I came home and I got a job at O. Henry's Coffee, because I was like, well, I want to keep playing music, and went and interviewed for the job, and I actually never went to the job, because what I realized was, the day that I have to tell somebody no, that I can't come play music because I've got a shift at the coffee shop, I was like, well, that's killing my dream. My dream is to play music, so I'm just going to figure it out. So I just kind of lived way beneath my means. We were, 4 guys. Yeah, there's 4 guys sharing an apartment, paying $300 a piece.
Hey,
and I was like, I can make $300 a month.
You put that with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
That's right.
You're under $500 a month,
That's
and you can figure that out.
That's right. So I was like, I just figured, availability was my number one. That was my number one kind of thing. I just wanted to be available, so that I could say yes anytime anybody called for that. So I actually told my roommate about it. He went and took that job and ended up managing. He was still in school, so he ended up managing O. Henry's, and had a great run there. So it worked out best for both of us. So I did that. Met my wife. We started dating right after college. I got out of college. We and I was like, I'm not leaving here now.
Yeah.
Best things happen to me.
Right.
I'm going to stay here for this. So we dated and ended up getting married, and just lived in Birmingham. So she was she went back to school and got her master's degree to teach, and I was just playing music, and we were just living the dream.
That's awesome.
Then we started having kids, had our first child, and we grew up with our moms at home. We were committed to that, and that was just a decision we made and how we wanted to live our life. So and I think that's just the thing that I've discovered is, if you could find out the things that you want to do, and you just kind of say that that's what we're going to do, you make that decision. It can be done. It's not easy. We lived on one income for a long time. And in that process, I was, doing the music thing. And then when my daughter was born, I really wanted good pictures of her. And we weren't making a ton of money. And so I was like, well, I enjoy photography. I took my parents gave me a camera right before our honeymoon. We went to Hawaii on our honeymoon, and I took all these pictures, and I thought I was a great photographer.
Yeah, Bora Bora will make you feel that way. Exactly. I don't know where you went, but
well, it was Maui.
Yeah, and you go to these incredible places, and you're like, yeah, that's pretty picturesque.
Exactly. So I had this false assumption that I was really good at what I was doing.
That's awesome.
It was just, the light in Hawaii is always perfect.
So, yeah.
Anyway, but it set me on this quest of really learning my craft. And so I kind of went down that journey, started taking pictures of my daughter. And then, 6 months into it, people were calling me to take pictures and not to play music. So I was like, well, this is the path I'm going to follow. It's something I enjoy doing. So followed that, then got into 2008 area when the economy was crashing, everything was changing. People, people's businesses were dying. And I, at that point, was like, I had clients that were saying, hey, you take pictures, but can you also do video? And at that time, the Canon 5D, if you know anything about video production, it was a game changer.
Yeah.
So that was kind of this perfect storm for me that it came together. And I was like, all right, well, I'll start doing video. And, the question for me is anybody, when people ask, can you, before they finish, I'm like, yeah, I can figure this out.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my approach. And, and we've stayed in Birmingham specifically for quality of life. We chose to stay here. When I got into my photography career, I tell people I had a wife, a kid, and a mortgage, and I didn't want to uproot my family and move to New York or LA. And some people have differing opinions on that. And the decision for us at the time was quality of life, and my family's always been the number one priority for me.
Yeah.
So
I love what you said earlier about just if someone asked a question, the answer was yes. I did that a lot too. I called it painting myself into a corner, and just like, I can do it. One of my first things in the creative space was I was playing music as well at my church and kind of in that space, and then the one of the youth groups wanted video announcements.
Okay.
And I literally did not know how to edit video at all. But so I lied, unfortunately. And I said, I can do that. Yeah. And then spent 2 weeks of the most stressful weeks that I had teaching myself how to edit video, made a video in 2 weeks. And from there, it's like kind of the rest is history. I mean, obviously lots of work, but I just painted myself into the corner. And that's so cool to hear that story of just like, the answer is yes, I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah.
The can-do attitude.
Absolutely. Because I started, I remember my photo career, I was starting to shoot for some national publications. And in Birmingham, there's Southern Progress at the time was a big, there's a lot of big national magazines here. And I went and was trying to get some work, and I got a job. Well, at that point, Southern Living, I'd started my career in digital photography. I learned on film, 35 millimeter. Yeah. And then I started digital photography as a profession. Well, when I went to them, they were like, hey, can you shoot on 2 1/4?
Wow.
And I was like, yes, I can. I didn't even know what 2 1/4 was.
Right,
That was the medium format. So I went, and there was a guy in my Sunday school class. His dad had been a photographer, and he had his old camera, and he was like, I'm selling this Hasselblad. I was like, can I borrow it? I didn't know if it had light leaks or anything. So I ran, I did all the tests, was just figuring it out, and showed up on set with this Hasselblad and just praying that the film would develop.
Yeah.
And, it was semi-successful, but it just, that was just
what you do.
Yeah.
What
else do you do? You got to provide.
So that it is funny because I remember that revolution of that Mark II just made it so accessible for so many people for a jump in quality and price point.
Yeah.
A lot of people came out of that, cut their teeth on producing content. That really propelled a wave of people advertising that wouldn't have done it before.
100%. Because the clients that asked me to do the video, they would not have done TV commercials without that solution.
Yeah, because the price point just didn't make sense.
Absolutely.
And it brought a bunch of people. I know that a bunch of people I know kind of moved up in that wave of crafting, cutting their teeth on that craft. So you do commercials, you're starting to do a lot of commercial work. I think we actually worked together. We hired you for some commercial photography. So you're still doing photography and video. Yeah. And then kind of where did it go from there?
Yeah. So in that, in kind of that journey, started a full service production company with a buddy of mine, Taylor Robinson, Taylor. We started 6'5" Productions together, and had a great run at it. We kind of built this business. It was full service, and just kind of realized we didn't have a sales pipeline, and we were doing the things we love to do, and we were kind of both doing the same thing, and so almost competing against each other. And what I was trying to paint my kind of unique selling proposition, USP, whatever you want to call it. My value was that I could do photography and video. So I could do a photo print campaign and a commercial campaign that's seamlessly integrated, on the same set with the same people. And I always joke, because I've shot behind other TV productions before, and sometimes there's a rub, because it's kind of a newer thing. It was never done much in the past. my joke was always, I'm the photographer and the director, and we're not going to get in a fight, and so we're going to be on the same page. So that was kind of what I was trying to sell, and it's still a challenge because the way things have fragmented so much that you don't really have print campaigns like you used to.
Yeah.
And TV is now not TV commercials; it's Instagram and social content.
Yeah.
So really, it's more based around video, I guess. And the photo world still happens, and it will never go away. It's just you're just gonna have to see how it kind of lands, and how these guys that I looked up to that are still doing art and art photography, they're still working, they're still doing stuff, but how does is it as commercial? It's just in flux.
It is a very pivoting time right now with. And has been for a while. I say now.
Because technology just changes so fast.
So fast.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I thought about that, and this is like kind of dating me, but I mean, I just got my son a watch to kind of have him be able to text and call us as he's going around the neighborhood.
Yeah.
He's 10, right?
Yeah.
And I thought about like, man, did I have something similar? And I remember in middle school, I had a pager. And
wow.
Yeah. So like just to think about the transition, and I'm sure you're somewhat similar, of starting with a pager and now having a computer in your pocket.
Absolutely.
I don't know of any other generation that's going to have that shift, that momentum. I mean, the advancement has been crazy in our span of life.
Yeah, we've seen so much change. And and I love that. I mean, I enjoy it. It's fun because that's the thing. I mean, I think probably the thing that characterizes me most is just insane curiosity, and so it kind of plays to that for me. And just learning these new things and being exposed to stuff, and it's fun. Doing that, and so you just got to ride that wave.
Yeah. So you do all that, you get the video production, and then kind of your third and probably not final chapter.
I hope not.
I was talking to her, like offline. I was like, we're kind of serial entrepreneurs.
Sure,
me and you. Like I think we all dabble, and I try to stay somewhat focused, but I also am good for the exploration of ideas. And so you at that point, I think you had bought a studio downtown, so you own some property. You bridged into starting a business, a very well-known local restaurant, and then also you've done some other real estate deals. So you kind of have merged all of these entrepreneur skills into now expanding and going into investments. You've done some private lending, different things like that. So I want to stay in the early years. Talk me through some of the fundamental lessons you learned in entrepreneurship, in dealing with clients, and just business, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Probably start with partnerships. I really like partnerships when they're right. I think it's a challenge. Warren Buffett says, "Don't ever lose money." That's his number one rule. And I was kind of thinking about that today. That I also said this yesterday. It's like, I don't know that you play these games without losing money. So I've never I'm not as smart as Warren Buffett, and I hadn't, figured out how to not lose money. So I have lost money. But you're really betting on a person when you get
into a partnership.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of the best way to say this because I do enjoy the camaraderie of starting something with someone. Yeah. Just the early days of, hey, we're in it, we're getting it done, and we're figuring it out. Those are really fun times, creating something 0 to 1. That's that whole Peter Thiel book and idea of when nothing exists and then something does.
Yeah.
That's like, if I could do that all day, every day,
yeah, you're a creator.
Exactly.
Effectively.
Exactly.
So when you partner with someone, are there filters that you have that you're like, hey, we're on the same page on this journey?
Yeah, I'm developing those, for sure. And I think it starts with the quality of the person, because things are not going to go right. I've had a lot of successful partnerships where maybe the business didn't thrive, but because the person that I was partnered with was kind and gracious and reasonable and had all these virtues that that I want to espouse and that I want to, that I believe in, that I think the fabric of their character, those have, because you're going to encounter hard things. There's no way around it. It's not going to be all sunshines and roses. So how do you deal with that, And so I've had some partnerships where, we've dealt with the hard things and it sucked, but we figured it out and moved on.
Yeah.
And I've had partnerships where it's gone great. I've got a couple that, they're fantastic and we're moving along. We're, being profitable. So, but it's fun to win with people you love.
I love what you said, and it's so true. It's like things will not go right.
Yeah.
You don't know what. Like no one can predict the future, but you can assume that at some point something's going to go awry.
Right.
And whether it's a production line thing or a miscommunication, and like knowing that the other partner or partners on the other side of the aisle have the ability and the skill set to work through tough.
Yeah.
Have the ability, skill set to think about it pragmatically instead of emotionally, and is key. So I love what you said, quality.
Yeah. And when you're young doing it, I mean, at some point there's no book that you can read.
Right.
You just got to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality. And sometimes those lessons are hard learned, and you can do all your due diligence and you can say, okay, well, this is my line of saying, this is not what I'm going to do. But, one of my favorite quotes is Mike Tyson. Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
It is so true.
I mean, you do. And again, until you get punched in the face. And, and the further along I get in my career, it's like I want people that have been punched in the face.
Yeah.
That, I can kind of look back now at your track record and say, how are you going to react and what are you going to do?
Yeah. Do you have a hard time saying that things are a failure? Because I say that in context because the more I get punched in the face, the more I go through trials, I see them as opportunity. And I'm always pivoting it to a positive thing.
Well, that's because you're a serial entrepreneur. I mean, that's the, it's not a failure. It's a lesson,
Right.
You didn't lose, you learned. So that's really, I mean, how you've got to frame it. I mean, because if you didn't, how would you get up in the morning, right?
Yeah, probably not very often.
Because, and people do that. And there are people, and I'm telling you, there have been the times I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
But, in that process, I mean, that's what makes it a lesson and not a failure. You know, I mean, you got to keep moving on.
Yeah. I also thought, and I don't want to pose this on you, but I found similar. The creative process is sometimes a very personal process. Mm-hmm. So you're putting in order to do good creative work, you have to put a little bit of yourself in it. But then you put it into the commercial world where they could not honestly care less about your feelings. They care about selling a product or accomplishing their goal, whatever that is that you're providing that advertisement for. So they're critiquing it. They're saying, adjust this. The very thing that you thought was the best gets cut out of that, commercial spot.
All the time.
And you're like, I love that shot, Yeah. And that would happen a lot to me too. And I think it just built like just reps in a gym. Similar to that, it just built in me like the end product is the most important thing. It's not personable. I can, and just keep going. But there were days, like you said, where you just don't feel like getting out of bed.
Yeah.
Is there anything that on those days that are tough, especially early on, because, now we're seasoned veterans, right? We never have a bad day.
Like a cast iron skillet.
That helped you kind of like reset and get back to it?
I mean, reality, I think, we're in the middle of this really loud conversation of self-care and self-love and I mean, Stephen Covey called it sharpening the saw back in the day. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You got to sharpen your saw. You have to take care of yourself in some way, because if you don't, then, the tool that you use is destroyed and you can't go do your work. So I think that conversation is very prevalent now. and figuring that out in a healthy way. I think, with any movement, things swing wildly, but there is value into taking care of yourself, health, your health, your mental health, physical health, all of these things are very valuable. So I think you've got to find that, whatever that is, and for especially during COVID, mine was 4:00 every afternoon. I was in the gym, mostly for my brain, mostly for my mental health. And because I do, if I'm not in production, if I'm not out shooting and I'm editing, I'm in the house, in my home office now, all day by myself. And so, having that expression to go see people and joke around, and, I kind of joke that it was my Cheers, the bar where everybody knows your name. You walk in and they're, and
all the other 4:00ers.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
We're there very consistently. So, I think that was a very key component for me.
Yeah. I would agree, routines, and especially the hard times, but I think that creative phase for both of us, for me and for you, it set us up for the entrepreneur side of like real estate, because there's some really tough things. I've lost money too, you know, and I go back to that quote from who was it, where you don't lose money. You mentioned
Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett, yeah. Famous
that's like
guy,
his number one rule, right?
I don't know if I agree with that, because I think sometimes in order to find the limit, you have to take risks that you don't necessarily know that it's going to work out.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, because I'm in the situation of having lost recently.
Yeah.
And in that process, because the stories you hear all the time are people winning. I took this big swing and I won. I took a big risk and I won. But I think there's a lot more stories of taking the big risk and I lost.
Yeah.
That you don't hear because they're not highlight reels, right?
Yeah, no one's going to say it because it's embarrassing. It's tough to deal with. You're coping with it yourself.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes, I've gone through all of those.
All those phases.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But I mean, but that's the reality, is that not everybody, but some people are going to lose. And, ultimately at the end of the day, you want to win more than you lose.
Right.
And if you can do that, then it's great, because think of a batting average. You bat 300, you're doing great.
Yeah.
That's 3 out of every, 10 swings you take, you actually make a hit.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not a high percentage.
No, it's not. I was thinking about Michael Jordan, someone, I don't, podcast or something, and they were talking about like game winning shots. Mm-hmm. And if you can't make them, it was Hermanzi was talking about, Alex Hermanzi, and he was like, if you find that you aren't making those game-winning shots, then you need to go practice in the gym and put yourself in pressure situations, and then when you do get the opportunity again, maybe you do make it, and that builds confidence that you can do it, and then you do it. But he was like, even then, Michael Jordan missed most of those opportunities than he made. Yeah. But he still took them. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And that's the thing in business, though, is there's not really a gym.
No.
So it's just like, well, you just got to get out and do it and keep your risk low enough.
Yes.
There's been things I've invested in that I'm like, it's going to suck if I lose this, but it's not going to bankrupt my family.
Right.
So you've got to figure out some protection, and for us, it was always just living way below our means. We were savers early on. We bought our house. I closed my first real estate property, my home, when I was 23 years old, the day before I got married.
Yeah.
And, and then have owned real estate since. It was always primary residence until about 2008, around that time is when I bought that studio you mentioned, and that was the first commercial property, but it was a very low risk because I was the occupant.
Right.
So really I was going to pay rent somewhere. And
might as well have been that space.
At least I'm putting it into something that I own, So I haven't been a very intentional real estate investor really until the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
But, I've had some exposure to it just because I felt like it was a smarter financial thing to do, and I can bet on myself. I've had much more success with me paying my rent than other tenants paying my rent.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I want to dive into, and this is a little sidebar note. How did that work with, because I've never gotten a loan for my own personal business. So how did you acquire a loan for the purchase of that condo downtown?
Yeah, it's been so long.
Yeah. I'm like, think back.
Yeah, but I mean, it was an investment property, but I mean,
Right.
they still. Now this was pre 2008 when I actually did the loan, because when we bought our first investment property after 2008, and this was probably in 16 or 17 when we bought that. It was a wildly different experience because I was like, they're going to ask for a vial of blood next.
Yeah.
Because I had never experienced this level of underwriting. And so that, 10-year period from when I'd, they had loaned me for my property, and I was a very low risk, at that time loans were real prevalent and easy to get.
Yeah.
And I was pretty low risk. It was owner occupied. When you go to a commercial loan, that's the easiest thing for a bank to lend on.
You're leasing to yourself. And you just basically, I'm assuming, showed your years of income from the photography business and stuff. And
so it was very much like a personal loan, I guess, that you would go get for a house. So it wasn't based, like you can do a commercial loan now based on the asset and its cash flow. Well, this was just, it was like a personal loan. It was just a property.
Talk me through, that part of the business and having a brick and mortar, how you felt like it helped you. Because you could have rented out studio space every time you needed a studio.
Sure, yeah.
If you needed to meet a client, you could have met at O. Henry's.
Yeah.
If you really, I didn't go that route. So I'm more of kind of curious as to, I kind of, and I was also working part-time. I was working full-time in a creative department for a church.
Yeah.
So my photography and all that was kind of a side hustle. You were full-time in the photography. So the purchase made sense, but you still could have, every time you need a studio space, rented it out.
Sure.
Every time you need to meet a client, meet them at some, coffee shop or you could figure it out some professional situation to meet clients. Why'd you make that choice, and how do you feel like that helped your business?
Well, mostly because I did not want to pay rent to something I didn't want. To me, I grew up, rent's just throwing money away.
Right.
So if I'm going to pay rent, if I'm going to pay that payment, I might as well pay it to myself somewhere. I needed a place to work. And at the time, I guess I could have worked at my house, because we were in the same house. But it was definitely a part of a wealth building strategy, a portfolio building strategy. Yeah. And because, I operated out of that and then actually moved out when I started traveling, because I was working out of Nashville mostly.
Oh, really?
So I moved out of that, moved into a smaller condo across the street, and then started renting that. That was kind of my first process or first exposure as a landlord.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, but at the time, I think it did help me establish my business. In that moment of history of photo and video world, it was still kind of coming out of this old moment of an established photographer with a studio space, all of these things that having a brick and mortar, I think, lent some credibility within the client base.
100%. I think so.
Yeah.
I think it probably got you bigger clients
probably
than someone who didn't. To have a space to go to, and it felt more like a creative environment.
Yeah. And the inverse may be true. I may have lost some of that because I don't have that space anymore. I don't know, but the world's so different now. After COVID, I'm so much different now.
Yeah.
It is just, it's different.
Yeah, that's it. I beg the question because I'm always thinking about what was the logic behind it, and even now, like where I'm at with, I've had some people even get office spaces. I still work from my home, and I'm like, what do I do this summer?
Yeah,
because kids are around.
Well, how does that work with your real estate?
It's really tough. So our brokerage is, I'm with EXP Realty, and so it's mostly online based. We have like a central office, but it's not like a.
Because for your license or for a brokerage, you have to have something.
Correct. Yeah. So they have a brick and mortar, and they have a frontage office for that, but they don't have it set up like a common. I think there may be an office space or two for me to go work, but it's not really. That's just not the culture of it. And I've actually thought about pivoting to a different brokerage potentially for that. I don't know yet. But I think there's benefits to both.
Sure.
But I think either way, like creative space, if we're not in with clients talking to them on the road some percentage of our lives. It's so brick and mortars are important still, I think, but they're shifting, they're changing, and that's why you see these common workspaces.
Sure.
I had Mark Hancock on, and he's had a lot of success with renting out like just single offices instead of having to have like multiple, building for your space. So it is interesting to see the pivots as COVID technology. It's just all shifting and stuff. So I'm curious. So let's talk about the entrepreneurship. Hero Doughnuts.
Hero Doughnuts.
You are one of the founding members of Hero Doughnuts. It's a place that my family loves to go to. Awesome. I want to talk about those early years. I mean, you guys basically, similar to Big Spoon, you guys just did pop-ups. So how long were you guys doing pop-ups? What do those early years of starting a restaurant look like?
So I was in the Phoenix building, which is before I bought my condo or my studio. And it was mixed use. It was a really cool development. It was mixed use, artist kind of based, and depending on your income level, if you're an artist, you could have a cheaper rent. It was really interesting. I don't know the mechanics of all the behind the scenes of that, but it was a place that one of my buddies held the lease for, and he lived there. We worked out of there. It was us just figuring out and getting it done. He was mining crypto in there. It was awesome. So they're great days. And in that building, Will Drake who's my partner in Hero. He was living there, playing in a band on the road. I had a music background. We'd be in the freight elevator up and down, so I just kind of got to know him from running into him there. Yeah. Then when I bought my studio, he started cooking there and doing these private ticketed events. We call it the Knife Party. It was super cool.
Oh, that is cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was like we'd sell tickets and have this big, long, 20 to 40 people, and this was early days of pop-up supper clubs. We actually...
Yeah, I was like going to say, now that's a thing that you're hearing about. You guys were like breaking on that.
Well, my buddy Zach Malloy, who was at Urban Standard right around from my studio, I got to know him. He moved to Atlanta, started doing this. We actually filmed a little documentary on him. Oh, cool. And then Will had served over there, and then we were like, hey, let's do that in my studio. So Will started doing, and they called it the Knife Party. Him and Roscoe Hall were cooking there. So it was those were just fun times, man. Just great dinner parties, and just, great conversation. Anyway, so we kept interacting with each other, doing stuff like that. And then I got him hooked up with a buddy of mine who's a chef that he was in London partnered with Jamie Oliver, Adam Perry Lang. And Adam had done a book tour here. And so when he came into town, I got Will connected with him, and Adam connected Will with a stage in Ireland to learn butchery. So Will went to learn butchery for 6 months, and I'm thinking he's going to come back. He's going to want to open a butcher shop. I'm going to invest in it, and we're going to off the races. Yeah. And he came back and he was like, I want to open a donut shop.
He said slightly different than meat.
Yeah, I was like, all right, man. And I tell people all the time, my belief and my investment was in Will Drake, not in the concept of donuts or butcher, whatever it was. I believed whatever he touched. He's super creative. He's a genuinely just beautiful human being that everybody loves. And I wanted to be around him. I wanted to help him. And so that's how Hero got started.
That's awesome. So you told me early on you bought the mixer for like the donuts, and it was just literally in your loft space, right?
Yeah. So the interesting thing when you start dealing with real estate, you have to different things. And industrial properties typically have 3-phase power. A lot of kitchens need 3-phase power. So we bought this 80-quart, I think, Hobart mixer. I think it had come out of a Jet's Pizza because it was powder-coated red, and which is really kind of the reason we chose red as one of our base colors.
Yeah. So it's like the mixer's red. It's got to happen.
And I was like, this is the coolest mixer I've ever seen. It's red. You don't ever see red mixers. I ordered mixer, fryer, proofer, all the stuff off some just used equipment website out of Chicago. Shows up on a truck. This mixer's, I don't even know. It's ridiculously heavy. So we're struggling. I ended up putting these little casters on it and just trying to get it in the studio. The truck pulled up behind my studio, and at the time this was the only place we had to put it. Yeah. And I had three-phase power, so we pulled it in there, and I had a buddy that knew enough about electricity. We had a conduit pipe wire running from like the loft. There's a loft. It's super high ceilings, and it ran a cable down to the mixer. You know, it was just so ghetto, and we just figured it out.
Made it work.
Yeah.
So you were doing pop-ups. You basically
this was before pop-ups. This was just to get the equipment going and running.
Okay, gotcha.
To do pop-ups, we actually ended up moving into a commercial space that is health department regulated because I mean, the worst thing you want to do is to circumvent the laws and really jeopardize anybody's health and safety. So we wanted to make sure once we were up and running, but this was just to get the equipment tested and make sure we knew what we were doing. So
give some family and friends some donuts to figure out if it's going to work.
Yeah, and the funny thing is I'd bought all that equipment, done everything before I ever tasted one of his donuts.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Did he? Do you know how long he tested his recipe before?
I think he's still testing it. No, he tells that joke. He's perfectionist and wants it, so it took him a while to get that recipe where it is now.
Yeah, and tweaking it and stuff. So you move into a space where you can actually make donuts and start pop-ups and all that kind of stuff. How long were you guys in the pop-up phase?
I say for 2 years, because it was 2 years really until that we did 2 summers, I should say that, 2 summers of Pepper Place Farmers Market before October 31st of, I'm trying to think what year I think it's 16 or 17.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Cut that out.
Was there parts in, like, when you did one summer and you're like, all right, let's go brick and mortar full restaurant, or were you pretty happy with?
No, we were intended to be in a brick and mortar from the beginning. That's the whole reason we started it, because someone had a space for us. And that real estate fell through. And then we had another place. It fell through. And we had another place. It fell through. So we kept having these real estate deals because we were pursuing brick and mortar the whole time. And it just took forever.
Okay, so with that, then, was there some benefits to that process, and maybe in? Yeah,
it was. I mean, it was hard lessons learned, and it was not comfortable. But we built a great fan base and kind of following that still to this day. I mean, because we were in Pepper Place, and Homewood is our flagship store, and Homewood is so good to us.
Yeah,
and that community supports us like crazy, and I mean, it was the reason we're even still around today.
Man, and I'll say, I almost think, and I saw that similar with Big Spoon. I referenced them because I actually did their logo. Like, I shot their wedding.
Oh, cool.
Jerry, Martha, and Ryan's wedding, and then they asked me to help their logo, and so, but similar pop up. I think their first one was like they made stuff out of their own kitchen and like we're selling it to like family and friends. Like, come by, and like you just literally pulled up to their house and tried their
I remember when that was going down, because we kind of grew and kind of,
it was similar,
very similar time frame.
Yeah, but I think Birmingham likes that.
Birmingham is
the
best supporter of homegrown food concepts.
Yeah, and
there's so much that has started out of here.
I know, and that's kind of what I want to talk to, because you have that network, you've been a part of that scene, and I think it's not the main economic driver of Birmingham, but I think it's significant, and we are being recognized and have been as a hub for really good local food.
Sure,
and talk to me through a little bit of that scene and kind of what's happening. So, because I think anyone who listens to this podcast, if they understand the economic drivers, they understand why to invest in certain areas and pockets 100%. And different stuff like that. So talk about the restaurant scene, and I've kind of mentioned it, but more in depth about.
I mean, well, it's regularly recognized, in national publications of it being, as great as it is, and you can look at national concepts and very successful concepts that have come out of this place, but it's just got a culture. It's got it's part of the culture is food. When you think about arts, food is the number one probably artistic expression that is valued here.
Yeah,
and I mean, you got Frank Stitt to thank for that. I mean, you can probably tie it all back to him, as far as the prevalence of it known on a national stage, of someone that championed food, championed at the time the slow food movement. He was a big proponent of that, and so many people have kind of come out of his stable, and gone on to amazing success. And we've had so many, if you look at James Beard Award winners and nominees, there's so many per capita in Birmingham. That's just, I mean, it's a little, it's kind of crazy, of what that is. But I think, if you look at how Birmingham started, right? It was this confluence of all the ingredients you need to make iron in one place. And that's how the Magic City grew. And that's what it was. Well, we have this, this now, in the South, really, if you talk about food cultures and foodways, the Southern Foodways Alliance is a big proponent of this out of Oxford. But the South really is kind of the United States that is the food system that is most culturally rich, I would say. The South has that, and so growing off of that, and it's not that every concept is a Southern-based, food concept, but we just have those roots of, I don't know how you grew up, but I grew up baking with my mom and cooking all the time, and shelling peas and harvesting corn, in our garden. So that's just part of the food culture that I think is just we continue to see that, and we continue to kind of invest in that, and people grab onto it,
Yeah, and I think people value it, and they put their money behind it. 100%. I've always said it's a good and bad thing, because if a new restaurant opens, it's if it's good or not, and it'll be there for about 3 to 4 months, and if it makes it past that point, it's good, and it's going to be successful. But if it doesn't, because everybody tries it. Like local restaurants, everybody's going to give it a go. Absolutely. And if it gets bad reviews, the word gets out, and it just tanks. Like I've seen several locations and tries, and then other places like Hero, I can think number of restaurants that are still around because the formative years, they got good rapport, good feedback, and now they're just cranking. Yeah. And I don't go... Besides Chick-fil-A.
You've got kids, man. You can't avoid Chick-fil-A.
But I don't really go to any chain restaurants because the food here is so good. I'm like, why would I not spend? Sometimes it's even price point even, but even if it's a little bit more expensive, why would I not eat at a place that's just way better? Yeah. Honestly, and unique 100%. to the town. And so that's one of the things I love about Birmingham. And I think it is a big economic driving force and a big cultural force. And as you were talking, I also thought about just, I'm originally from Colorado, and, one thing I was struck by the culture is like, if you invited me over to a football game in Colorado, I'd be like, do I need to bring wings? Do I need to bring some beers? Like, and all that. And I might offer, but for the most part, like if you invite me over, I know you're inviting me over for the whole experience, that everything's provided. I just got to come with my like smile and energy. That's and don't root against your team. Exactly. So if I'm not a fan, you're an Alabama fan, but just don't.
The truth is if I know you're not rooting for my team, you're not getting an invite.
Yeah, it's probably true. You're not getting the invite. But every, event is centered around food and gathering, and it's just not true everywhere.
That's interesting because it is always true for me. It always has been. That is the culture I know and has always been part of my life. Yeah. And it's interesting to hear you say that it's not, because I don't know that.
You don't know any different.
I don't know any different.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is like that's what's so unique about the South, and I think why we value food and gathering, because it's so closely knit with our communities.
100%.
And so that's why these restaurants are thriving and doing well, is because it's a part of our culture. Right. And I say all that. I know that we're kind of diverge into like a little bit of a cultural thing, but someone who is investing from outside, if they don't understand that, they aren't going to make choices based on it. And this is why I say Eastlake, perfectly good example. I think Eastlake will do well eventually. Mm-hmm. I think it is still growing. There's still a lot of positive, but it's stalled out a little bit, and I think it's partially because of the retail and the lack of restaurants there. And if that scene could hit those pockets, and there could be some revitalization around the things that the communities value, then it would help the progression of those communities being revitalized. And it is not the only factor, but it helps a lot.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the revitalization of a neighborhood is generally followed by the artists, and the creatives are the first ones there. And chefs are those artists and creatives. And a lot of them, if you go back and look at a lot of chefs and where they started, they found this really cheap place on the outskirts of town, whatever, and then they became the draw.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why and then they're like, oh, I actually saw this house. It actually looks pretty nice. Let's go in. We can buy this and renovate it. And then one person, another person, and then just people who want to see places, thrive, start to move in.
Yeah.
So, this journey has been really interesting. I kind of wanted to, tap off with where kind of your experience in real estate has taken you and kind of what you're exploring now and kind of what you've learned on that journey. And I know that you have some rental properties on lake, and you obviously sold, you had your studio space and you sold it, learned a lot through that. So talk me through the real estate side of your journey.
Yeah. So, with that first property that I bought, that was my studio. That was kind of my first commercial property, but I really didn't buy anything else until many years later. We bought a short-term rental because my brother-in-law was building at the beach, and so we were like, we got to, it was really opportunity. And that's kind of I would say my real estate investing has been very opportunistic, So my brother-in-law was building, we bought that place. I've got a couple buddies that knew Smith Lake, and they wanted to invest. And I was like, hey, you've got an agent, you've got some leads. That's an opportunity. We'll do that. Right. I've got 2 commercial warehouses with my partner, John, who needed a place for his business. And he had seen what I'd done. And so I was like, well, hey, if I can help you, let's do this. And so we bought a warehouse, put him in it. Then other people were interested in renting that. So we bought another one, moved him, and
kicked him out.
Yeah. And,
Sorry, John. Yeah. You got to go.
He was happy to go because we got another asset.
Yeah.
And then he and I just bought a single family rental in West Homewood because it was an off-market deal that we just kind of happened upon, and it was an opportunity. So what I want to do in my next phase is be more intentional, and I really like industrial kind of triple net leases because I'm not an operator, I'm not a manager, I'm a creative. I like to take something, either build it or renovate it, or those are the things that excite me and where I feel like I can add value. And so that's kind of what I want to do is get to a place where I can creatively put something together, put a deal together. Like even selling my studio, we ended up combining that with another unit that I was able to kind of, create an off-market opportunity for the guy that bought it.
Yeah, talk me through that deal, because you had for people who are just listening, but you basically, there was a long portion of a bigger building, but this it's sectioned off, and you had the back portion. There's a front portion that a lawyer's office was.
It was an odd when the developer did it. My unit was kind of an odd shaped. And it was a really kind of hard sell, but it was actually perfect for me because it was kind of 2 rooms, high ceilings. We put a loft in. It was great shooting space, had a little kitchenette, all that stuff. Well, it didn't include parking, which was directly behind my unit, and parking downtown. At the time, I actually rented half of it, but it wasn't deeded to my property. It was deeded to the unit in front of me. And so when I was going to sell mine, the guy in front of me, he was like, hey, I see you have your sign. I don't want to put my unit on the market because I don't want to disrupt my business. But if an opportunity comes, I would be willing to talk. And so when the guy that bought mine, he looked at it and he was like, well, it's not big enough. And I said, well, if I can make it bigger, I mean, how many times can you say that in real estate? If I can make this bigger.
If I could grow the square footage, the price goes up.
Yeah. But. And I was like, well, if I can put that together, would you be interested? And so then, I started putting together a deal. And I do have my license. So I got my real estate license during COVID, so I could operate as a buyer's agent. And I guess, I was
you were seller and buyer's agent.
Yeah, it was kind of this combination, which is great because I like to problem solve. I like to see a problem and let's create a solution, that works. So that's kind of, how I put it together. and it actually works really well. I haven't been since he's done any renovations, but it was going to be real easy to connect the two units, and then he has a full parking lot for all of that. So, had my business looked like it did, 8-10 years ago, I might have done that, because it's actually a great setup and because the guy that bought it does video production as well. So
oh wow,
so he's
That's
got
awesome.
a front side that's doing office, where he's got his editors and all that stuff. I assume in the back is a shooting space. It's really well set up for that.
Man, that's awesome. I love the creativity.
I do too.
And the aspect of thinking outside the box and saying, okay, well, this is what you're wanting. How can I craft this deal? Or, I think a thread through all of your career has been the creative. You create
and it's
deals.
It's taken me a long time to figure that out.
Yeah.
Because we talked earlier, you were talking about this guy that's a true artist, like a real creative. I've never seen myself as like this real precious artist, my work is, probably more so with my music. And then as I've been in commerce doing art, you have to develop a thick skin. You have to kind of remove your identity from all of your artwork. And so, like now we were talking about, people critique or what. I'm very open-handed of, okay, well, just tell me what you want,
Yeah.
You may have a better understanding of something that I don't know that's going to fit your brand, your commercial, whatever it is better. And I will always have opinion. This is my thing. I always have an opinion, but you're the client and I will always default to you. I will tell you my opinion so that I will add value and I think what you should do. But if you want to ignore that and do something different, great. I'm here. I'm your cheerleader. We're going to make it happen. So that's kind of the way I approach so much of my creativity. And so I think that it's made it hard for me to say I'm a creative, but as I get older, I'm like, no, I really am. That's because it's what fuels me.
Yeah. And I've come to that place too of like trying to figure out, because obviously I actually, did music, some very similar paths, got in the creative work now in the space, but I'm currently in Hueytown doing a flip, and the process of taking, it was a burnout, bro. This thing is and we took it down to the sticks.
And see, that sounds so awesome. That sounds like so much fun to me.
Yeah, and it is really fun to see it, from the beginning stages, all that, to now. We got drywall up, tiles in. We're probably about a month out from coming to market, and had to rework, rethink with the GC. We had to rethink where the laundry would be. And I actually had an idea and he had a better idea. Mm-hmm. And it was I could even hold on to well, I'm the guy who has more aesthetic. And it's well, no, let's talk about it. Let's figure it out and let's figure out the best solution. And those creative years of doing that with other projects, I think, has allowed me to be open to giving my opinion, but also being open to others, collaborating, working, and all that kind of stuff.
If you can remove that ego, I think that's what happens a lot of times in creative work, in agency and advertising and all that stuff, is the ego gets stirred up because you want to show that you're valuable and you want to earn your keep, kind of a thing. But I think, being able to have that just kind of open hands of, hey, let's figure this out, because so when I first bought my condo, I almost didn't get it because of a 12-inch lift, because it was a commercial space and mine was the only unit that the door did not open directly on grade. So that makes it now you have to have ADA accessibility because you can't roll right in.
Yeah.
So, that almost killed the deal. So we actually had to put a sidewalk through the parking lot, get an easement for that, put where a window was, put a door, then put a metal ramp that was 16 feet long because your grade can only be so much per foot.
Right.
So I had to figure that out, move a hole. So there's a hole into the backspace that we had to move up over here so that a wheelchair could come in. And I was like, oh man, first night we opened, someone in a wheelchair came.
Wow. And this was when you originally bought your studio on the front end. You had to do all that to get the loan approval, or
that was just to get a CO?
The CO, okay.
Because it was a commercial space.
Yeah.
And so we had to figure that out, and it took a while because we had to figure that out on the front end because didn't want to buy it if I couldn't use it.
Right. Yeah. It would be dead space.
Yeah.
Man, and you just kept next step. Okay. What question do I ask?
Yeah.
And that, man, it is so interesting. I wonder too, the people who have it, and I think creativity, and being in the creative space, it really has been a huge leverage for me. And I know it has been for you, but I think some of the guys that I see come up in this space that are a little more rigid, or sometimes, like, to be honest, like prideful in their deal structuring, or like they get in there like, I'm gonna get this deal. I'm the big guy in town. It bites them. And I think there's a humility that the years of like, hey, I don't like that color. And you're like, well, I did, but now I'm changing it. And you just have to lay yourself down.
Yeah.
And you got to say, okay, this is what's needed. I think has benefited both of us tremendously in just the humbling of it. And just like, okay, let's just make this deal work. Let's figure it out.
Yeah. And that's the thing, when you could come in a collaborative spirit of let's figure it out,
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that, rigidness, or so much of that is just born out of insecurity, in my opinion,
Yeah.
And I've kind of always been, my play, everybody has insecurities, and everybody has, so my play with my insecurities has always been to play up my naivety. Is I'm very much the first to say, hey man, I don't have a clue what I'm doing, but I'm trying to do this. Could you help me?
Yeah.
Because I never want to, I don't know. I've always taken that position that I'd rather have a low expectation and over exceed it than the opposite, And I think, if I come in saying I know exactly what I'm doing, there's going to be something that I've forgotten or something that I screw up on. Yeah. And I'd rather just be like, oh man, I'm so sorry. I don't know. Yeah.
That's great. I think and we haven't even gotten on the networking and relationship, but I think you're probably incredible at it. And through all the years of doing creative work, and then also, every single one of your real estate deals has a partner. Well, maybe not every single one, but the ones you listed off.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting of just,
most of them,
those opportunities have come through relationships and just conversations.
Yeah.
And just, it kind of makes me, it inspires me to be like, what conversations do I need to keep having, or, collaborative, with my network of like, hey, what are you working on right now? Yeah. And like that. So, thank you for that. That's cool insight.
I don't think it was on purpose.
I think a lot of our lives, I think there's intentionality in how we set up our lives, how we set up our habits, how we go about our daily, our values, how we hold to those values. But then there's an aspect of life that's organic and just happens to us, and we seize opportunities when they fall in front of us, and then we say, oh, that turned out good. And some of it's just luck. Yeah. Some of it is preparation, but some of it is just luck. So, but this has been a great conversation, man. I appreciate it so much. I think there's certain interviews that I have on here that are like very like, I'm learning. And then there's other ones where it's like very collaborative in the sense of like, I don't know, this has just been a really fun conversation because our career paths have had some similarities. Yeah. And so it's like, dude, I totally get that, or like, I feel that, and it's inspiring.
And that's the thing. I'm still learning real estate. There are things that I'm doing today that, 2 years ago, and one of the big things is I was a Dave Ramsey guy. I'm like, no debt, Dave Ramsey, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And my paradigm, I've had a paradigm shift and a perspective shift on that. Not to say that what Dave Ramsey is saying is wrong, but knowing the audience, there are some people, his audience, a lot of his audience is, man, if you can get to where you can live debt free, that's great. Don't spend stupid stuff on, or money on stupid stuff on credit cards. Yeah. I was never that guy, but I also got to a point of, well, what do I do next? How do I progress? Yeah. And so it's the last few years have been a big journey of me discovering that, being exposed to things. You mentioned private lending. That was something I 2 years ago. I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah.
And the way so there's just I love the journey of learning. I mean, I absolutely love that. But it's I'm not going to come on here and tell you any advanced, super tactical, but anything because I'm learning.
Yeah, I think we all are, but it's a mindset thing. I think, there's a lot of information about understanding Birmingham's culture, especially with the food. We talked about that. And then just like I said, the chops of what it takes to be an investor and to be an entrepreneur. And too, like, I think sometimes we have a limiting mindset. I know I did.
Oh, sure.
I coming from the creative space, I was like, now I'm an investor. Like, even when I left my job before, they were like, what are you doing now? Like, they were just like, it's a huge leap, Yeah. I'm like, I'm a realtor and investor now, and, but, just breaking through those barriers, hopefully someone else listening to this is like, oh, I could, even though maybe I have a background in being a hairstylist, like, I could be this.
That is the thing. That is the thing for me that, and I don't know how I'm going to develop this or if I'm going to develop it or what, but so many creatives do have that limiting mindset. Now, I've always had this delusional mindset of I can figure anything out, and it's been good or bad, But I think so many creatives just have this starving artist mentality, and like, because I'm going through this with my son right now. You don't have. I mean, he plays a very niche style of music that doesn't have a big fan base and doesn't have an example of somebody that he loves that has gone on to, be wildly successful financially.
Right.
Great. You still have to figure out a way that can provide, because the way this world works is you gotta pay for your bills. You gotta pay to live. So how can we protect the creativity and the opportunity to create and do creative things that we love to do, whether that is like the Rolling Stones, where they, have done what they've done forever and made millions and millions of dollars and are set, and they do it just doing their career? Or do you do it where, like the guy, I remember this guitar player that was a phenomenal guitar player. He played in a cover band here, but he could play anything, but he was a painter, but he painted, like house painting, so that he could play the guitar and, express his passion and express his creativity that way, because some people want to protect that as their safe space. My daughter does that. Like, music is her safe space. Yeah. She doesn't want to sully it with, making a living doing it.
Yeah.
And I was always, well, I'm going to pursue my creative pursuits and make them my job.
Right.
And there's good and bad of both of that. So it's more the intentionality of what do you want to do? Where do you want to be? And building your life in a way to support that. You know? And I think real estate is a great way to, because I keep thinking of people are like, what's your dream world? Well, if I have enough passive income, I'm going to develop a small bay warehouse, and I'm going to have a unit that's mine, that's my studio. And I'm going to have my drums in there. I'm going to have my recording stuff in there. I'm going to have a big canvas in there that I can go paint like Andy Warhol.
Yeah.
I'm going to, maybe do some sculpture, just have these days that I'm just creatively expressing myself for the pure joy of creating.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
So I think, you have to build the moat around your empire, or whatever you want to call it, or just however you are going to support your way of expressing that.
Yeah. I love it.
Because so many creative people, they get in this mindset of, well, I'm going to be a starving artist and all these different things. And I just don't believe that.
Yeah. No, I 100% that taking off the limits and seeing that you can be a lot of different things, and don't let people niche you down to, I'm only this.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's very hard in this society. Very difficult. And that's been the biggest thing, because I have a friend that, like, we would hang out and we'd meet new people, and he always joked when someone was like, well, Jason, what do you do? And he would smirk and just look at me, just kind of laugh.
I want to see how you answer.
I want to hear this. And I have a hard time answering that.
Yeah.
But that's our culture, and I agree, that gets into the conversation of shiny object syndrome, and FOMO and chasing different things. But at some point you do, I've heard this analogy, you have to build a bridge all the way to one island, and I felt like I did that with my photo and video career.
100%.
I built that bridge, and now, whether I've maintained that bridge as well as I should have, I don't know, but it's allowed me to look at other things, you know, and because, I mean, even building that bridge, all of that work is not, like, all of that creative work is not work that I'm like either super proud of or I had a blast doing, you know. Not all of it was joy flowing, you know. Some of it's just was a drudge, and you just
it was a job.
It was a job, you know. So I think there is value in finding and investing in your time and things that you enjoy and ways to do that. And so it's still, you know, still a pursuit that I'm after, but I'm just kind of, at this point, I'm unemployable, so I got to figure it out.
You got to figure out. You painted yourself into a corner.
I did.
Full circle.
Full circle. 100%.
Well, you still do creative work.
Absolutely.
And you obviously have invested. If someone wants to reach out to you, just curious about your story, maybe wants to work with you from a creative standpoint or something, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, just Google Jason Wallis, Wallis.
Pulls it up.
Yeah, Instagram. I'm not on Twitter, Facebook. My website, you know.
Yeah.
Some of it's dated, some of it's not. I mean, you know, you can reach me through any of those.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for the time. You know, I've just valued this conversation personally a ton. And even you reaching out to me on Facebook, I was like, whoa, Jason Wallis, you know, because I remember you being that photographer that I looked up to and did a lot of commercial work. And so it's just cool to sit, you know, and have this conversation.
It's great to reconnect, man.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it.
We'll do a deal sometime.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
See ya.
Thanks.